What will my data be used for? And will it be shared in future research? Will I be told about that? There are research biopsies that are part of my clinical trial information. What kind of information will I be able to get about, this type of data that will come from my participation?
Sure. That's another great question. So one of the things that we all tell our patients is early phase trials or even late phase trials try to answer certain questions that help drive the field of cancer research, future cancer drug discovery, and biomarkers that have identified which patients may or may not respond to certain treatments. So to do all of that, it becomes important when it's feasible and safe to obtain research biopsies, tumor biopsies, or in many cases, blood from patients. And all this is done after appropriate consent has been obtained from the patient. So the researchers who analyze your tumors are, who incorporate research biopsies or blood collection into their trials. They usually discuss the consent form, and they have to discuss the consent form with the patient to tell them what all is being performed, what all potential tests may be done. Sometimes it can be variable. They can mention that genomic tests, for example, may be done, which may include different types of genomic tests that may not be specifically mentioned on a consent form. But these are all things that the trial principal investigator or the associate investigators discuss with the patient to tell them how those research samples will be used and how they intend to use the data. And the data is usually de-identified. It's not linked to a certain patient. So all this information is kept in a de-identified manner. And for example, if genomic testing, which is mutational sequencing of a tumor, if that identifies a certain mutation on a patient and it has implications in the clinical care of a patient, even if it's a research biopsy, sometimes investigators take the liberty to inform the patient if it can have future consequences for the patient, and it can vary from one trial to another. But no research in a clinical trial is performed without the knowledge of the patient, which is, I think, one of the most important aspects of doing a clinical trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will say sometimes there's additional analysis that can be done after the clinical trial is complete to look at some other thing that wasn't part of the initial intention. So for example, there are some great analysis looking now at for flight quality of life, or for me, I'm interested in cost and affordability, specifically about how if cancer treatment has become a financial burden. So one example I'll give is that you might have filled out a 30-question symptom burden. One of them was about your financial concerns. And then someone might go back and actually look to see, okay, for these people who were enrolled in this clinical trial, how many of them had financial concerns? And then did that affect their ultimate, how they did in the long run? And so that is something that can be done sort of retrospectively. They're using the data that you obviously consented to, when you enrolled in the clinical trial, but it may not have been completely apparent that they were, going to ask a specific financial question. And so I find that is a very hopeful aspect of clinical trials, meaning that we really are trying to use every piece of data that you spent your time on to fill out. We want to make sure that we're able to use it to benefit future patients, if not, the patients obviously in our clinic today. So there are these potential kind of retrospective analysis of clinical trial participants that can also kind of glean additional information that can help improve cancer care for the future.
Absolutely.
That's great. This has been such a comprehensive conversation. I mean, thank you to both of you so much by helping to answer all of these questions. And I think your answers will greatly help patients when they're deciding whether or not they wish to investigate participating in a clinical trial. There's so many things, that have to be considered and so many unknowns that have to be balanced. And I think this conversation today was a great step in the right direction in, creating transparency for patients and improving their knowledge of the trial process, especially for a phase 1 clinical trial. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Elkins, for all the amazing questions, and Dr. Chino for all the amazing input. Really appreciate it, and hopefully patients will benefit from this session.